All right, guys. So good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. Happy Friday. Appreciate you all tuning in today, especially on a Friday and with the chaos of the new semester that always occurs, right? Especially in the fall. So I appreciate you taking the time to just tune in and join us today. This is actually, I don't know how many I've done of these now, but I always enjoy doing these webinars with Bama and health promotion and wellness. This is something I'm passionate about and I love talking about, so I'm excited to be back here again. Welcome to Fitness Mythbusters, part 4. I believe it's part 4. That's what I have written down. You didn't have to come to any of the previous ones to join in on this one. Each one's independent, but each time we kind of treat it like the old show Mythbusters, where we look at different common sayings or beliefs or ideas about fitness, and then we dive into them and decide whether or not they are true, whether or not they're a myth, or maybe they're somewhere in between. Like I said, I love doing these. Well, let me introduce myself. So I'm Charles Burroughs. I'm the fitness services coordinator with University Recreation. I specifically oversee the personal training programs, both at the Student Recreation Center as well as the Robert E. Witt Center. Fitness is something I'm passionate about and I love. I love working with clients one-on-one, working with our trainers. It's something that I just really enjoy. Fitness is not something I was always passionate about or interested in. For me, it was about 10 years ago that I started to exercise for the first time, started to lose weight and start to get a little bit healthier. And for me, when I started doing that, I realized that it's something that I really like, and that, for the longest time, I didn't think that fitness was for me, that I was able to get in a healthier shape, both physically and mentally. And for me, fitness was something I didn't think I could do. And when I started to try and I started to do that, I realized that, nothing was necessarily holding me back. It wasn't genetics like I thought it was. It wasn't that I didn't have the mentality for it. But what I started to realize is that, health and fitness can be for everyone and that everyone can benefit from it. And so that's why I'm here, and that's why I like to do these presentations and why I work in this industry as a whole. I've been working in fitness for about 7-8 years now, and working here at the university for 3. In fact, it was just a few days ago was my work anniversary. So I've been here 3 years now. But with all these presentations, I always love them to be interactive. I know I can't see your faces, but at any time, please feel free to pop questions into the Q&A or the chat, and I will try to get to them as quickly as I can, especially if it's regarding what we're talking about at the time. If it's not, I'll probably save it to the end because I'm not great at multitasking, but I definitely want to answer any questions you guys have. In fact, I always try to save room after each little myth or thing that we talk about. And then at the very end, I want to have plenty of time for that because you guys always have great questions and I want to make sure I can answer those. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Saying number 1, if you don't use it, you lose it. I'm sure every single one of you have heard this one before because it's not just used in regards to fitness. It's used with almost everything, right? Whether we're talking about a sport, a skill of some kind, art, music, really anything. It's very often said that if you don't use it, you lose it. And when we think just anecdotally, this happens a lot, right? Like maybe you used to play the piano a lot and you fell off. All of a sudden, you noticed you weren't as sharp at it as you was before. Maybe you lost a little bit of that skill, or it seemed to go down a bit. It seems to happen a lot. We observe it a lot. And so it's commonly believed that stopping something can result in a rapid decline or undoing of the progress we made. When we're talking about fitness, this can be really unmotivating or really discouraging. The idea that all that progress we made can be undone if we just stop doing it for a little bit. And so I think this is an important thing to talk about. So let's go in to the facts. There we go. So the facts, the decline. So declines have been observed when we stop exercising, when we go from doing something regularly to just stopping completely. We do notice a reduction in the progress that we make. So there have been a lot of different studies on this, but I want to kind of break it down into two different categories, one being changes that we see in muscle strength and muscle size, and then also cardiorespiratory training. And when I say muscle strength and size, I don't want you to tune out on me. A lot of times when I say something like that, people who their goal is not to build muscle or get really strong, it's like, well, that's not for me. But actually, any kind of exercise that we do, it still involves our muscles. And as a result, our muscles do adapt to that exercise, even if it's running or bicycling. And so for most of us, we'll even see a small increase in muscle size and strength, even when we're doing an activity that's not strictly resistance training or weight training. It still impacts us. And so what we see is that if we completely stop doing anything, measurable decreases in strength start to occur about 2 to 3 weeks of no activity. And that's usually the study I'm referring to there. It showed about 15% reduction in 2 weeks. So it's not real noticeable if you just go like 1 day or 2 days or a weekend or even 1 week. But if you go an entire 2 to 3 weeks, that's when you can start to notice some decreases in strength. Additionally, there is research to show that our muscular size does decrease as well. So if we totally stop doing anything, we see that it can decrease about 11% over 11-day period. In other words, about 1% a day. What I will say is that's a little bit on the higher end. There's a few different studies from different participants and situations. This one was specifically some advanced athletes, some like Olympic lifters, and they went from doing it almost every day to just totally stop it. And when that happened, the decline was pretty significant. Now, and we'll talk more about this in a bit, but it does depend on the circumstance. You know, if you go from working out 3 times a week to not doing that anymore, but you're doing something else that's still using those muscles, that decline won't be as great or as intense. So there's definitely some contextual factors we want to look at there, but I'll talk about that more here in a bit. Now, in terms of cardiorespiratory training, so anytime that we are working our heart and lungs, getting that heart rate up, we are working on cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory training. And we do see that measurable losses are seen actually pretty quickly with this. In fact, what we saw is that it's measurable after about 1 week of inactivity. And I'm sure any of you who have ever done like a running program or something, and then you stopped for a week and then got back on it, that first run probably felt pretty rough. And there is a reason to that. And one of it being is that the cardiorespiratory adaptations that you made while doing it did decrease a little bit. In fact, about 4 weeks of no cardio can lead to about a 20% reduction in oxygen consumption. You also see that second one says a halving, a 50% decline in enzyme activity. I'm not going to talk about all what that means, but oxygen consumption is actually the way that fitness professionals can measure accurately your cardiovascular endurance or fitness. So it's commonly used mostly with athletes because measuring it can be a little challenging. But basically, all it's saying is that oxygen consumption is the rate that your body takes oxygen you breathe in, converts it to energy, and sends it to your muscles to use. And that's used a lot in cardio. So with 4 weeks of no training, that process of oxygen consumption can reduce by about 20% or about 1/5, which is pretty significant. That can be a pretty big drop. So of these two things, the thing that really declines the quickest is going to be cardiovascular exercise. But as we can see here is that anything that you don't use, you do lose actually. But there are some considerations here. If my slide will change, there we go. There are some considerations here. The amount of decline is going to largely depend on the context. It's going to depend a lot on the individual. If how much do you move on a regular basis? What is your daily physical activity? That will impact the decline. If you go from, perhaps that you work like a very physically demanding job at like a warehouse, and then you also work out as well. If you were to stop working out, but you kept working, that decline is not going to be near as noticeable as if you worked like a sedentary job. Because that sedentary job, you're just not going to be using those muscles or your cardiovascular system quite as much or quite to the same extent. It also depends on your current level of fitness. What we actually see is that people who are more advanced in their physical fitness, they see a bigger decline when they stop exercising. The exact reason for that isn't quite understood. My biggest guess is that it just goes from being such a high level of fitness and you're doing a whole lot, that gap between that and being sedentary is a lot bigger. And so perhaps that's the reason why we see a bigger decline with increased fitness level. But regardless, we do know that is a factor here. Also, we see is it depends on how long that period of inactivity is. That one might seem obvious, but if you're inactive for 1 week, the decline is going to be less than if you're inactive for a month or 2 months or a year or 2 years or whatever it is. So the length of time does impact it. And then I also put on here severity of change, and that's very closely related to like daily physical activity level. But basically, if you go from exercising every day to being bedridden, that's going to be a big difference than going from exercising every day to just not exercising, but still moving regularly. So there are definitely some things to consider there. And all this to say is that one thing I really suggest, one thing I ask you to consider is to avoid the all or nothing mentality. I see this so much with clients and really even with myself sometimes. I have to really keep that in check because it's very tempting to say, if I can't do it all perfect, I'm not going to do it at all, right? How many times have we started something and we missed the first day or missed the second day and we're like, well, this whole week's done, I guess I got to stop. That's a really bad mentality to have towards fitness. And I've observed personally that people who really stick to that idea, they really struggle to be successful because there's always going to be something that pops up, that comes up that can kind of roadblock us or slow us down. And if we have this all or nothing mentality, it's very easy to fall off the track and just stop completely. And so one recommendation I've had here is to really avoid that mentality. Because the fact of the matter is that any activity is going to help mitigate those losses. A really good example I have of this is a trainer I used to work with. His name was Austin, and Austin was in really good shape, really muscular, worked out a lot, had good cardiovascular fitness. And I remember one day he tore his labrum in his shoulder. Now, before I'd worked at that gym, I was always kind of the mindset that like, oh, if I roll my ankle or something, I just stop and I just take a break and heal and hopefully get back on it. But Austin, he really surprised me when he hurt his shoulder because he was following the strict program and all of a sudden he wasn't able to do anything with his upper body. He had to completely rest his shoulder. But rather than just saying, oh, I'm going to stop, he's like, all right, what can I do to still do something? And so he changed his program to have more leg workouts. He started doing more cardio, more core work. And I think it took about 8 to 9 months for him to fully heal from that whole process of the surgery, repair. And yes, he did lose a lot of strength and musculature in his upper body, specifically that shoulder. But he was able to accomplish a lot in that time anyways. He got stronger legs. He got better cardiovascular endurance. He got a stronger core. And a lot of it just came from having that mentality of, well, what can I still do? And deciding to do something rather than nothing. Because as we see, if we do nothing at all, that decline or that drop in what we've accomplished so far is more dramatic when we do nothing. So I really want to encourage you guys that if something comes up or if you have to stop doing one activity, try to find something else. Try to develop a problem-solving mentality of, well, what can I do to keep going. Now, I don't want to start on doom and gloom because I know seeing that those declines and those percentages can be disheartening at first, but there's actually some really good news. In fact, I find this absolutely fascinating. And one of the best parts of this is something called muscle memory. This is actually not a myth. In fact, this could be its own myth in this presentation. But muscle memory is a very real thing. And what I'm saying by muscle memory is that when our bodies adapt to exercise, especially something that conditions our muscles, the blueprints for that change are stored in the nucleus of the cell. I'm going to get a little biology on you here, but basically, all of the blueprints on building muscle, on building mitochondria, which is this little powerhouse in your cell, it's all stored in the nucleus. And whenever we start exercising regularly, we actually develop what's called multinucleated cells. In other words, we're making more little pockets of storage in our cells to house this information. And so even if we stop exercising and our muscles shrink, we lose a lot of strength, we lose a lot of the adaptations that we did, those cells are still there for years. We still maintain multinucleated cells that have all the blueprints that are just waiting for us to start back again. And so what we actually notice is that if you've done it before, getting back to that same point is a lot less challenging than getting there for the first time. So that's actually really good news, because that means if for some reason you do fall off, you can still get back on it and get there in a very reasonable amount of time. In fact, there are multiple research studies that show that regaining the results that you lost, both cardiovascular and muscular, take about half as long as the time it took to lose it. So if you took off 2 weeks from running, it'll take you about a week to get back to it. And that's pretty fast. I feel like our body's pretty forgiving in that aspect. And that should be comforting, because I know that, if you miss a week or miss a workout, it can feel really frustrating, like you fell off track and we really beat ourselves up over it. But actually, we can get back really quickly, and that it's not going to take 2 weeks to get back. Usually it only takes about half as long, which I find very comforting and a lot of ways forgiving. So that is the good news here. So if you don't use it, you lose it. It is true. The good news is that we can definitely engage a lot of different techniques and abilities to, one, avoid that loss, but also we can still get it back in a reasonable amount of time. Our bodies are very forgiving, and even though we might lose it, if we don't use it, we can still get it back. It's not gone forever, by any means. Any questions about that one before I move to the next one? I'll wait just a second here, just in case. If not, we will move on. I don't think I see anything. Actually, let me know if I miss anything, but I don't think I see anything, so we'll go to the next one. There we go. All right, on to the next one. Belief number 2. To lose weight, I need to do cardio. This is really, really common. People will often start new like cardio routines or increase what they're already doing in order to lose fat. I feel like we've gotten to a point where we synonymously associate running and any kind of cardio, biking, swimming, whatever, with weight loss. And so as a result, a lot of times people think that this is required in order to lose weight, in order to lose fat. And so, first off, why do we think that way? I think a lot of it has to do with the different media and entertainment that we absorb, right? We watch a movie or a show and we see someone, like the show The Biggest Loser, right? And we associate weight loss with this idea that you've got to go through these grueling cardio workouts in order to lose weight. We see it in the movies. We hear it anecdotally from our friends and people that we know. People will say, "Oh, I started running 3 times a week and the weight just fell off," or I did this program or that program and I needed to do that in order to lose weight. And so I think in order to really address this one, I think it's important that we understand how weight loss works, and then understand how cardio relates to that weight loss. I think understanding these two things will clear a lot of stuff up here. So first off, right back to the facts. Fat loss occurs when our body burns fat as energy because our food intake is not meeting energy demand. What's great about this whole process, the process of weight loss, is that the basic science of it all is tried and true. It is proven. I drive that home because, I think probably once a year I'll have someone debate me on this. Usually not a fitness professional, but someone who says, oh, well, I followed this, I followed that, I tracked these calories, and it didn't work for me. But what happened there most likely is that the calorie number you were eating was wrong, or the number that you thought would be correct to eat was wrong. And I'll kind of get to that here in a bit. But what's good about this is that we know this works. There's a ton of evidence that supports this, both anecdotally and from research. But as long as our calorie intake is less than what we burn, we will lose weight somehow. Basically, our body is a lot like a car. Our body needs fuel, and we've got to put fuel in there. What's unique about our body is that if we don't have enough fuel, we don't just break down. Our body says, okay, what else in the body can I use for energy? Now, ideally, our body goes to stored fat. That's usually the first thing our body chooses, because that's mostly what extra fat is there for. It's a source of energy that we can take and use just in case. Fat cells are very dense with energy. So it's a very useful resource that we have in our body. Now, our body doesn't just use that, though. It can also break down muscle. And even if your goal isn't to gain muscle, it's still not good to lose muscle. And we want to avoid that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, of how to avoid that. But generally speaking, we want to avoid anything that can result in our muscles breaking down. Because if our muscles break down, we need less energy to fuel our muscles because there's less of them. And then as a result, our metabolism will decrease. And so a lot of times you'll see people who go into a very extreme caloric deficit because they want to lose weight quickly. Maybe their body needs 2,000 calories, so they only eat 800, and they're nearly starving themselves. But what will happen is their body will adapt to that by not just burning fat, but by also burning a good bit of muscle. And especially if they didn't have a lot of muscle to begin with, that lowers their metabolism even more. So then if they were burning 2,000 calories before, now they're only burning 1,800 and then 1,500. And if you continue this up for a long time, it can really be detrimental to your metabolism. And what we also see is that if they then go back to eating 2,000 calories, they will gain weight instead of maintain. And so that becomes a really unhealthy cycle if we're not careful of eating a really big deficit and then starting to eat away our own muscle. So in other words, when calories consumed are less than calories required, we experience weight loss, and that does happen, absolutely. The only question mark or the only complication starts to come in the rate that we do this and what the actual calorie number is. That's a really tough one to determine. A lot of times there are general recommendations. You can put in, your height and age and weight, and you can find a number that should be pretty close. But to be quite frank with you, the best way to find that calorie number is to try one of those things and then play around with it and actually track your numbers. You might find that while normally someone your age and weight and size, they burn 2,200 calories, you might only burn 21, or maybe you burn 23. It's really hard to calculate that exact number. And the best thing to do is to trial and error and figure out. And that might require a little bit of tracking for a few weeks. But after a while, we can start to identify what's working. But another fact that we do know is that physical activity does increase energy demand. And so I think it's that idea that leads a lot of people to think that we need to do cardio in order to lose weight. But really, the fact of the matter is it's just physical activity as a whole. And I'll talk about that more here in just a second. So the impact of cardio on weight loss depends on volume, how much you're doing, and then how intense it is. Just like a car, if you drive 50 miles, the gas requirements for that are different than if you drive 200 or 300 miles. And so the amount of activity that we do does impact how much we need. I'm sure some of you have heard before that the Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps, that he would eat like 8,000 calories a day. It wasn't that he had some sort of super genetics there. The fact of the matter was that he was exercising and moving so much that that's what his body needed. So the amount of cardio, or the amount of exercise that we do impacts our weight loss depending on how much of it. Okay, so the more that we do, the more that it'll impact it. Also, and I think it's important to drive home, is that it's not just cardio that does this. Weight training and really any form of physical activity is going to also be beneficial in losing weight. In fact, weight training, there's a big argument for that, in that if you gain a little bit of muscle, you are able to help expedite your metabolism and make it easier to lose weight. My old boss at my old gym, he would always say you should gain muscle first and then lose weight. That was always his mentality. And while I don't think that's true that you have to do that, I do see the benefit of that, because it does increase your metabolism and it makes it a little easier when it comes to figuring out an eating plan. One little note that I have on there, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I wanted to mention it, and that's that HIIT training, which is high intensity interval training, has been shown to burn calories more effectively than almost any other kind of workout. Part of that is just because it's really intense, but it also just seems to have some interesting metabolic effects that speed up calorie burning just a little bit. I'm not going to say it's a huge amount, but if you're really looking at trying to burn a lot of calories, HIIT training can help with that. There's a pretty good body of research that shows that HIIT training is very effective. And for those of you who aren't aware of what HIIT training is, basically it's a workout of alternating between high intensity and low intensity. So a very simple version of that would just be running sprints. So you run all out for, say, 30 seconds, and then for a minute, you're just walking nice and slow. So it's up and down, up and down. That form of working out, regardless of the exact activity, row machine, running, boxing, any form of that style workout is very effective at burning lots and lots of calories. Again, don't want to get too deep there, but just wanted to throw that out there for anyone wanting to know. So to lose weight, I need to do cardio. As we just talked about, that's not true. The by far most important thing that affects weight loss and that affects fat loss is going to be calories. One thing I'll go ahead and mention now is that if we ever try to do a very extreme caloric deficit, that's when our muscles can really take a toll. So what I really recommend is to try to discover what your metabolic rate is. There's a lot of different calculators and stuff that you can use that gives you an idea. And I recommend playing around with that and trying to track for a little bit to see what is it that you need to consume to maintain where you're at. And then from there, choose a deficit that's around, say, 500-600 calories, something like that. I want to go ahead and throw out my disclaimer here now that I am not a dietitian. I'm not a registered dietitian. I've spent a long time studying nutrition as it relates to fitness. So I avoid, and as most fitness professionals should, we don't talk about every micronutrient and how each of these play a factor into our health. We're really talking about nutrients as it relates to physical activity. And so when we're thinking about like a caloric deficit and stuff like that, I'm thinking about how that relates to our progress and what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and try to recommend specific foods that will, cure certain ailments or anything like that. Just strictly talking about performance and getting results from your workouts. A caloric deficit is going to be the best thing to help with weight loss. One other thing I'll say, because we'll talk about it more in the next one actually, is that one nice thing about exercise is that it helps to reduce stress. I'm sure we've all heard that before, but stress can also discourage our body from wanting to lose weight. I'll talk about that here soon, like I said. But exercise can be really helpful if that's our goal, simply because of the stress reducing factor. So that's an important thing to consider, is that we don't need cardio, we don't need exercise in order to lose weight. But there are a lot of great benefits that will tie into weight loss and that will help with weight loss. So any questions about this? To lose weight, I need to do cardio? No, myth busted. While cardio can contribute to weight loss, nutrition is by far the most important factor. The other things are just helpful. They're complements. I'll wait just a second and see if there are any questions before I move on. Don't want to miss anything. Seem to be good. Okay. All right, on to the next one then. Saying number 3, I should have a cheat day. I couldn't help myself. I had to include a picture of The Rock. For those of you who don't know, that's Dwayne The Rock Johnson, previous professional WWE wrestler, actor, entrepreneur, all that stuff. But he's also really well known as a fitness fanatic. But the reason I included this is he kind of has this thing where he's obsessed with what he calls epic cheat days, where once a month he will just go all out and eat an absurd amount of food. Like he'll order like 5 pizzas, like large pizzas, and like eat it all. I'm not gonna say that's healthy, but he is obsessed with this, and is kind of the poster boy for cheat meals in the fitness industry. It's really funny. Well, let's talk about that. You know, a cheat day in a very basic sense is just, it's a break from a structured program that we're following, usually in regards to an eating plan. Yeah, so it's a break from a normal eating plan that we've been doing. It's an opportunity to, disregard these rigid guidelines that we've been following and just enjoy our favorite foods. I'll go ahead and say that a cheat day is usually talking about food and not about working out. I make that distinction because we're going to talk about how those two intertwine. But if we take a day off from working out, usually just say it's a rest day or whatever. Cheat days are usually talking about food, right? So let's talk about the pros and cons of doing this, because there are some. There are good reasons to do it, and there are good reasons not to do it. So I think it's important to talk about them. So the first one is that it provides a mental pause from the challenges of a strict regimen, especially when we're first starting some sort of eating plan, really trying to maybe improve our eating habits. Maybe we're trying to lose weight or gain muscle, whatever it is. But that challenge of doing that, of changing the way we normally eat, is exhausting. It's mentally challenging for us. And even there's actually some research to show that our brain feels like we're deprived when we do that, especially if we're used to eating really carb-dense foods, lots of potatoes and bread. When we go from eating a lot of it to a lot less of it, our brain's natural response is to be like, hey, something's wrong, we're deprived. And so we actually feel kind of bad at first because we feel like we're missing out on something. So a cheat day provides a mental pause from that. It can be really helpful to just get a little reset, a little break before going back to what we were doing. It can also serve as a reward for the hard work and adherence that we're doing. We know that having some sort of reward system in place is really effective in keeping us on track. When we know that there's going to be something good that we can get for doing this, and it doesn't have to be food. In fact, a lot of times I recommend that you have some sort of reward for yourself that isn't food. Maybe you go buy yourself a new pair of shoes or something like that. But having a reward system in place has been shown to be very effective when we're trying to adopt a new healthy behavior. And so it's nice to have some sort of reward system in there. And for some people, maybe it is food, and that's what you want to be a reward. It can also help refuel energy stores in your muscles. This one's actually a lot more specific and scientific. But if you are in a caloric deficit, sometimes it's challenging to refuel the stored energy that's in your muscles. because you're just getting enough to fuel your body. So storage can be a little bit challenging. So having these cheat meals is actually shown to help restore what's called muscle glycogen, and that stores in your muscle to be used for workouts. So a lot of people will notice that that first workout after like a cheat meal or a cheat day, you seem like you have more energy than ever. And a big reason for that is because you have a little bit more stored energy there. It can also help reduce physical stress. I touched on this just a little bit, but there's a couple of studies that show that a rigid caloric deficit is stressful. And we're not real sure if that's just psychologically because it's tough, or if it's just your body saying, hey, something's wrong, I'm going to stress about it. But regardless, your body often will release more cortisol, which is a hormone that can inhibit fat loss, or at least slow it down. It won't stop it, but it can slow it down a little bit. And rigid caloric deficit eating can increase stress. So having this cheat meal is a good way to reduce that physical stress and to give you a chance to, like I said, get back to normal, or to feel normal again before you go back to any kind of rigid eating. So that is some different pros that you can get from having a cheat day or cheat meal. Now, the cons of cheat days. And in this case, I'm really talking about a whole day or even multiple days. Excessive caloric surplus, that can be detrimental to our progress if our goal is to lose weight, plain and simple. But really, it just comes down to what that cheat day looks like. I really recommend not just completely going off the rails. The Rock, he's able to do this because he knows himself really well. We're going to talk about that here in a bit, but he's able to stop after that one day and go right back to it. If your cheat day becomes 2 cheat days or 3 cheat days, at a certain point, we're going to start offsetting what we're trying to accomplish, especially if we're trying to lose weight. I've had a lot of clients who said, well, I'll eat healthy during the week and then just eat what I want on the weekends. And that can be really helpful for some people. But a lot of times what I see what happens is, well, Monday through Thursday is good. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday is really bad. Like, we're overcompensating for the foods that we missed out on during the week. And if we have only 4 days of good eating and then 3 days of bad eating, that's going to offset a lot of what we just tried to accomplish during the week. So it's important that if we implement a whole day, we really try to make it just one day and really try to spread those out so it's not just consecutive. And another reason that a cheat day can be detrimental is that it can make us feel bad physically. If you've ever gone from eating like a really, really poor diet to eating something that's really healthy and nutritious, you notice a difference in how you feel. I remember in college, almost every meal I was eating out. It was McDonald's and Whataburger and all this stuff. And when I first stopped doing that and started eating healthier foods, I just started to feel a lot better. And when you're feeling really, really great and you've got that momentum going, then you at the time are like, oh, I can have a whole weekend of eating bad and not regret it. But what we notice is that once you eat a lot of that food consecutively, you start to feel bad. You start to feel groggy and tired, and you start to feel guilty. And then it becomes a lot harder to get back on it. And that ties into that last point I have there, is that it can have a negative impact on momentum. And I would say more so than the surplus issue of offsetting our results, is the mental issue that we have with doing this. And is that we feel guilty. Maybe we just enjoyed eating those foods so much that we don't want to go back to what we were doing. But it can be kind of playing with fire if we get a little bit out of hand with these cheat days, especially when we have a behavior that we really want to adopt, especially if it's in regards to health reasons. If we know we need to eat better in order to help with our blood pressure or cholesterol, and we start implementing these cheat days, those could have negative impacts on our health. We need to be careful with that. So that's something we want to consider if we do have a cheat day, is we want to make sure that we know ourselves well enough that we can manage those. And so that's my first point on these considerations, is you need to know yourself. You need to know if having a full day or even 2 days to cheat, if you're able to hop back on it that next day. The Rock, he's really good at that. He can go crazy one day and the next day he is right back on track to eating healthily and paying attention to what he's eating. But we're not all like that. I know for myself, I don't do well with having a whole day of just eating whatever I want. It can be very easy for me to have a downward spiral where I just stop exercising, I stop eating healthy. And so for me, that's not something that works well. Really, what I often recommend for most people, especially early on, when you're just starting to eat healthy and starting to make changes, is to do cheat meals instead of a cheat day. And all that really is taking the same amount of meals and spreading them out. For me, I found that I'll have one cheat meal on Wednesday, like Wednesday evening for dinner, and then Friday evening, and then Saturday lunch or Saturday dinner. And what that does is it spreads it out, which has both a nice impact physically and mentally. Physically, it avoids that feeling of feeling completely awful when you have a lot of bad food back to back. It avoids like a really extreme caloric surplus. But also it's really good mentally because even if I know I'm going to have a bad meal for dinner, I'm still eating well for breakfast, for lunch. I know the next day I'm going to get right back to it. And there's something that's just a lot easier about not making a full day event and it just being a one-time thing. It also allows us to kind of plan our meals around it. Maybe I know I'm going to go and eat a lot of pizza for dinner. So maybe I have a little bit lighter lunch or a little bit lighter breakfast to help offset that. I found that personally having cheat meals instead of a cheat day is a lot more beneficial for me and staying on track. So that's one suggestion or consideration that I recommend. Another one is also to have your cheat meals or cheat day, whatever, on workout days. I recommend this for two reasons. One is that, as we talked about, exercise helps to burn calories. And so if we know we're going to eat a lot more than we normally would, then exercising more can help offset that a little bit. I'm not going to say that 30 minutes of cardio is going to offset pizza and cheeseburgers and all this stuff. That's a bit more complicated, but doing that day is going to help burn more calories. And also because exercise releases endorphins, it reduces stress, you'll feel better about maybe the poor eating decisions that you might make. And then also it's helpful because that you're still doing something that day for your goal. That's something that I really stress a lot with people. I stress almost every webinar I do. And if you take nothing else away from this, other than this one tip, and that is to every day do something that is going to get you towards your goal, whether it's something that you eat, whether it's a physical activity you do. Maybe your goal is to run a marathon. That doesn't mean you need to go run 5 miles a day, but maybe it's going for a walk that you normally wouldn't, or going for a light jog, doing something every day that gets you closer to your goal. I know that for me personally, if I do have a whole cheat day, if I worked out that day, I'm much more likely to get back on my regimen or whatever the next day. And so I never suggest making your rest day from exercise also being your cheat day. For me, that's a formula for disaster. So I definitely don't recommend it. And then the last consideration that I have for this one is to have a plan. And to not just have a plan, but be flexible. So that first part of that, having a plan. What I mean by that is try to plan if you're going to have cheat meals or a cheat day in advance. Don't let it just be a whim, spur of the moment thing, at least not all the time. The reason being is it just really helps with that self-discipline aspect of it, is knowing when you're going to do it. That helps you to stay more regimented when you're outside of that day. And it also gives you something to look forward to. Now, with that being said, some flexibility is good, just because life sometimes gets in the way. Maybe you went to a work lunch that you didn't expect and you had a cheeseburger and fries, and that evening was supposed to be your cheat meal. Well, be flexible with that. Say, okay, lunch, I'll go ahead and do this. And then maybe I just won't have that cheat meal for dinner or whatever. Make sure to be flexible. And part of that is, well, one, being flexible, but also having some forgiveness for yourself and being able to say, okay, maybe I did this and didn't plan it. That's okay. Rather than beating myself up, rather than having that all or nothing mentality, instead, I'm just going to change and adapt to that and continue to move forward with my goals. Okay, so I should have a cheat day. It depends. Not the most exciting one to put on there, but it's true. It really depends on yourself. I would say that a cheat day or cheat meals are great, and they're a really good way to reward yourself for the hard work that you're doing, whether it's exercising or following a specific meal plan, whatever it is. Having cheat meals, especially, I feel like that's a very good reward system. I'm not going to say it's good for everyone. It depends on your relationship with food and your own eating habits. And so I think it does take a little introspection and considering of your goals. But I'd say for most people, having a cheat day or a cheat meal is good. In fact, I recommend it for most people. All right, questions. That was actually my last one. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of time to answer questions and be able to answer any questions that you guys have. It can be related to these specific myths or any myths in particular. Like I said, I love getting questions for you guys. And so I wanted to make sure to have some time to do that. So I'm going to hang out here for the next 10, 15 minutes and answer any questions that you guys have. So let's hear it. What do you got? If you guys don't have any questions, that's okay too. I do appreciate you all for tuning in. You're definitely welcome to stick around to hear questions or to ask questions so that I can answer them for you. Like I said, I'll keep hanging around. I don't see any questions right now, but I'm going to keep waiting and see what we got. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Caleb, Stephen, Katie. Thank you, all you guys. Just so you know, always feel welcome to reach out to me. I'm located over at the rec center. My email is just cburroughs@ua.edu. I'm always here to answer questions about programming or whatever. I'm more than happy to do so just because I love to talk about this stuff. It's something that I'm passionate about. And like I said, I enjoy. So you can always reach out to ask any kind of questions you've got about exercise, especially. Just so you know, we have some other stuff going on. Oh, someone said they asked a question. I'm going to go check it. Okay, so here's a great question. One person asked, what's your take on fasting while working out? That is a great question. I would say for the most part, that's not a problem. We just want to make sure that we are refueling ourselves at some point. That can be done before the workout. That can be done after the workout. Some people, it's during the workout. I don't recommend that. But fasting is not a problem. It just depends on what your goal is. Obviously, if your goal is to gain muscle or your goal is performance related, then I wouldn't recommend fasting before a workout. Just because, I had mentioned about that stored energy in your muscles. Some of that energy is going to get used to fuel your body just to help make the deficit filled if you're not eating enough. So I would say by and large, fasting is fine. Just make sure that you are eating something after to help refuel that energy, or your blood sugar will drop. You'll start to feel really bad. Don't recommend that. Just make sure that you're eating at some point after. That's totally fine. One person asked, how do you keep someone from over preparing or binging on their cheat day? So like I said, part of it is planning beforehand and knowing yourself. What I really recommend is have something specific in mind. One interesting thing you'll start to notice is that if your goal is weight loss and you're eating in a caloric deficit, while it does take a little bit of time, your body starts to adapt to that amount of eating, and you won't be starving all the time. After a while, at first it feels like it, right? Because our brain is saying we're in a deficit, we're being deprived. But after a while, your body starts to adapt to that. And what you'll start to notice is that, on your cheat day, you had planned to eat a whole large pizza, and you actually only eat, 2 or 3 slices. But again, part of that going in with a plan. So for me, myself, I'm going to purposely not necessarily order the biggest thing that I want. Maybe I want 2 double cheeseburgers and fries and soda, but I only get 1 instead. We don't have to completely go off the rails with our cheat meals. Sometimes it's about managing the amount of it. And so I'd recommend going in with a plan beforehand. If you have a plan, you're much more likely to succeed than just trying to wing it and just say, well, I'm going to eat whatever that day. But again, if we try to maintain it to just a meal, even if we do go a bit overboard, it's not going to ruin things. So great question, though. All right. Any other questions? Cheat meals. We can talk about training loss or training gain. We can talk about adaptions, training style. Like I said, I just love talking about this stuff. Yes. Thank you, John. Thanks for joining in. All right. I had a question in the chat. Says, any tips on what to do in the interim when you're trying to get to a caloric deficit? So part of it is going to be patience. If you found some sort of calculator that tells you about what you think you're going to burn, then if you're eating around that, then I can almost guarantee you're not going to gain weight. If anything, it might be slightly over what you actually burn, but it's going to be so small that all we really need to do is just track that for a week or so and then drop it down. So like, let's say that number said that you should eat 1,800 calories. And you're eating 1,800 calories and you do that for, about a week and you don't notice any changes, then that would be a time to drop it a little bit more. This can be a gradual process, but I think it's really important to approach it that way because that's going to be much more beneficial for our long-term success. If we just try to jump in and do something extreme, we might get quick results, but it's rarely manageable. We see that a lot with a lot of different fad diets that we see, things that really aren't maintainable. And it's because it's really extreme and it's not something that can last. So my biggest recommendation there is find one of those calculators and aim for, say a couple 100 calories below that number and see how it goes for a week or 2 and then make adjustments. And as long as we continue to approach it almost like a science experiment where we're keeping track, we're paying attention, what might seem like a grueling process can actually be kind of fun. And we start to make adjustments slowly and kind of adapt to how we see our body reacting to that deficit or to that surplus, whatever we're doing. So that'd be my yes, is just to track it closely and just be confident knowing that what you're doing is going to work. It just takes some time. That's really important to remember. And that's hard to do if you've never had long-term success before. So I always recommend trying to find an accountability partner or someone that can help you because they can kind of keep your brain focused when it's really easy to get frustrated and fall off the track. Having someone there for accountability can be really helpful when we're going through this process of finding out what's going to work. But the biggest thing is just persistence. Let's see. Someone said, my daughter lost weight over a 9-month period of keeping track of her calories and walking, almost 50 pounds. Congrats. That's amazing. It really goes to show that if you stick with this and that if you just trust the process, it will work. Sometimes it takes time, but it will work. And I think what a lot of people can get caught up on is that the task before you, right? The goal you have before you can feel really daunting. My recommendation for that is to try to break it up and to try to look for other goals as kind of like subset goals, right? Maybe your goal is to lose 50 pounds, make 5 pounds your first goal. And I think what you'll find is that once you start making any progress, it becomes a lot less overwhelming because it's really satisfying to see the results of your hard work, whether it's getting stronger or running farther or losing a pound or gaining a pound of muscle, whatever it is. I think you'll find that even if you have the most daunting task in front of you, if you break it up and accept and enjoy the little rewards that you see along the way, those little improvements, it becomes a lot easier. And so congratulations to your daughter on that hard work. That's awesome. Love to see that. All right, any other questions? We got about 4 more minutes. More than happy to answer any questions. Or we can just hang out. I'm just kidding. While we're waiting for more questions, just so you know, group exercise schedule has started for the fall. So you can go to the UA website and just search group exercise or fitness services, and you can find that schedule. We've got all kinds of classes, everything from mind, body, like yoga and Pilates, to strength training, total body training. We've got cardio classes, dance classes, cycle, a lot of really fun stuff. I really encourage you to come try a class if you've never had before. I love the community aspect that comes from group exercise. For a lot of people, that's that motivation or accountability they need is going to a class. It's not for everyone, but I found that a lot of people absolutely love it, and I love doing it as well. Some other things that we have coming up, we've got a personal training prep course coming up next month. So if you or any students you know are interested in becoming a personal trainer, this course gives you everything you need to prepare for the certification exam. So our goal ultimately is to hopefully get a few candidates that if they get certified, we can hire on at the rec center. Really great opportunity for students or even professional staff if they're looking for, a side job, something like that. Definitely want to throw that out there. It's a really great course. I might be biased because I teach it, but it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of practical hands-on skills and really learn how to effectively train people and not just take an exam. Also, we have a fitness program called Mayhem that starts later next month. It is a group fitness program, a group fitness program, not a group fitness program. But it's a program you sign up for, and we're going to be doing workouts outside at noon. It's for the fall, so it shouldn't be too hot. But it's kind of a boot camp style workout where we're swinging sledgehammers, flipping tires. If you've never done a workout like that, it is a ton of fun. You get a little bit dirty, but it's worth it because it is a lot of fun and very rewarding experience. If you're interested in that, you can also go to our website and just search for Mayhem or fitness programs, and you'll probably find it on the website. But that's just some of the things that we have coming up this fall. And of course, follow us on social media if you don't already. We release a lot of good announcements about the rec center, things that are going on, whether it's weather updates or classes or all the different stuff we have. But yeah, I will hang out for about 2 more minutes. See what else you guys got. All right, well, if no one has anything else, then thank you so much again for coming, guys. Again, I really appreciate it. I know I'm going to be doing another webinar. I'll probably need to check my schedule when that is. I think it's November. Ashley, you might know off the top of your head, but another one in a few months. It's going to be another Fitness Mythbusters where we dive into some other common sayings or opinions about fitness, and we'll dive in and find the truth, whether it's correct or not. But definitely hope to see some of your names again on future presentations. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great Friday and a great weekend.